Kim Tae-ho sat in the cold metal chair and stared at the red stamp across his test papers. The word rejected burned into his eyes like fire. Around him, hundreds of other young people cheered and hugged each other as they got their assignments. To the great space fleets that protected Earth from alien threats. His hands shook as he folded the papers and put them in his pocket. The testing center buzzed with excitement. Park Jin-woo, his best friend since childhood, ran over with a huge smile on his face. He waved his acceptance letter in the air like a victory flag. Tae-ho, I got into Thunderfleet. Can you believe it? The Thunderfleet! Jin-woo's joy made Tae-ho's heart sink even deeper. Jin-woo had always been good at everything. Sports, studies, making friends. Of course, he would get into one of the best fleets in the galaxy. Lee So-min walked past them with her head held high. She had gotten into the Admiral's personal squadron, the most elite group in all of human space. Everyone had expected this. She was the smartest student in their academy, the fastest pilot, the best at everything that mattered. The other students gathered around her like she was already a hero. Tae-ho remembered how she used to help him with his studies, always patient, even when he couldn't understand the simplest things. Even Choi Do-hyun, who barely passed basic training and spent most of his time sleeping in class, got assigned to reconnaissance. When Do-hyun saw his papers, he laughed so hard he almost fell over. I can't believe they want me. This is crazy. He had scored lower than Tae-ho on almost every test. But somehow the military computers found him suitable for service. The alien testing officer called out names from his list. Velthar was tall and thin with silver skin that gleamed under the bright lights. His voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. Kim Tae-ho, report for final evaluation. Tae-ho walked to the front of the room on legs that felt like rubber. Every step seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. Velthar looked at the test results on his screen. His large black eyes showed no emotion as he read the numbers. Subject 2847 Tae-ho, Kim. Neural pattern incompatible with standard vessel interfaces. Spatial reasoning scores below minimum threshold. Combat reflexes inadequate for space warfare. Hand-eye coordination insufficient for pilot duties. Strategic thinking patterns do not match fleet requirements. Each word hit Tae-ho like a physical blow. Recommendation: support logistics or civilian service. Next candidate. Tae-ho stood there for a moment, not believing what he had heard. Velthar was already calling the next name. The other students avoided looking at him as he walked back to his seat. He felt like everyone in the room was staring at him, whispering about the failure who couldn't even qualify for the lowest positions in the fleet. Outside the testing center, Kim Hye-jin waited for her son. She had taken the day off from her job at the medical center to be there for his big moment. Her face lit up when she saw him coming out of the building, but the light died when she saw his expression. Tae-ho? What happened? Did you get your assignment? Her voice was full of hope and fear. Tae-ho couldn't speak. He just shook his head and handed her the papers. She read them twice before the words sank in. Her shoulders sagged and tears filled her eyes. Oh, my son, I'm so sorry. She hugged him tight, not caring that other families were celebrating around them. That evening, Kim Sang-min came home from his job at the shipyard. He had been a hero in the Centauri campaign 20 years. Ago, leading boarding parties against alien vessels when humanity first encountered hostile species. His medals still hung on the wall of their small apartment. When he saw the rejection papers, his face went gray. He sat down heavily in his old chair and stared at the floor for a long time. I don't understand, he finally said. You're smart. Tae-ho, you've always been able to fix things that nobody else could figure out. Remember when you repaired the building's power grid when you were only 12? The technician said it was impossible, but you made it work better than ever. Tae-ho remembered that day. The entire apartment building had lost power during a storm. The official repair crews said they would need weeks to fix the complex damage. But Tae-ho had crawled into the maintenance areas and somehow understood how all the circuits connected. He rerouted power through systems that weren't designed to work together, but it worked perfectly. The technicians called it a miracle. The military tests are different, Dad, Tae-ho said. They measure things I'm not good at. Speed, reflexes, following orders exactly. I think too slowly. I see problems in weird ways that don't make sense to normal people. The news spread through their neighborhood quickly. Mrs. Yoon from the apartment Next door made sure everyone knew about Tae-ho's failure. "I always knew that boy was strange," she told anyone who would listen. "Always taking apart electronics and putting them back together in ways that shouldn't work. Too quiet. Too different. Not military material at all." Mr. Bay from the ground floor felt sorry for the family. He remembered how Tae-ho had fixed his broken communication device last year. The boy had stared at it for hours, then made tiny adjustments that somehow made it work better than when it was new. "He has a gift," Mr. Bay told his wife. "Just not the kind the military recognizes." The recruitment billboards throughout the city seemed to mock Tae-ho now. Huge holographic displays showed brave pilots fighting alien ships among the stars. "Your galaxy needs you," flashed in bright letters. "Join the fight for humanity's future." The messages made him feel smaller and more useless with each passing day. Jin Woo tried to cheer him up. "Maybe this is for the best, Tae-ho. You could go to technical school, become an engineer. Someone has to build the ships we'll be flying." But even Jin Woo's kindness felt like pity. Soon Jin Woo would leave for the orbital academies with all the other accepted candidates. Tae-ho would be left behind with the failures and the broken. That night, Tae-ho stood on the balcony of his family's apartment. The city stretched out, below him, full of lights and life. Above, he could see the bright points of the orbital stations where the new recruits would train. Shuttles moved between Earth and space like shooting stars, carrying the chosen ones to their glorious futures. He thought about the test questions that had defeated him, scenarios about commanding fleets in battle, making split-second decisions that would save or doom thousands of lives. The computers had measured how quickly he could react, how precisely he could follow complex orders, how well he fit into the standard patterns of military thinking. On every measure he had failed, but standing there in the dark, watching the complex dance of ships in the sky, Tae-ho felt something stirring in his mind. The movements weren't random. There were patterns in the traffic flows, rhythms in the way the vessels moved between stations. He could see connections that weren't obvious, solutions to problems that didn't have standard answers. Maybe the tests had measured the wrong things. Maybe there were different kinds of intelligence, different ways of seeing problems that the military computers couldn't understand. Maybe being different wasn't the same as being useless. A warm breeze blew across the balcony, carrying the sounds of the city below. Somewhere in that vast network of lights and lives, there had to be a place for someone like him. The galaxy was bigger than military tests and standard procedures. There had to be room for minds that worked in unexpected ways. Tae-ho folded his rejection papers and put them away. Tomorrow he would start looking for his real path, the one that led not to the glory the others sought, but to something he couldn't yet imagine, something that would need exactly the kind of strange, different thinking that had marked him as a failure. 6 months after the Great Rejection, Tae-ho found himself deep in the metal belly of orbital station Kepler 7. The station hung in space like a giant wheel, spinning slowly to create artificial gravity for the thousands of people who lived and worked inside its hull. Down here in the maintenance levels, far from the gleaming command centers and training facilities above, Tae-ho spent his days fixing the ships that other people got to fly. His supervisor was Lim Jae-sung, a gruff man, in his 50s who had lost his left leg during the Proxima raids 5 years ago. Jae-sung walked with a mechanical leg that clicked against the metal floors as he moved through the repair bays. Most people felt sorry for him, but Tae-ho quickly learned that the old Marine was tougher and smarter than anyone gave him credit. 4. "Hand me that plasma wrench," Jae-sung said as they worked on a damaged fighter. "And stop looking so miserable. You think this work is beneath you?" He studied Tae-ho's face carefully. "Let me tell you something, kid. I've seen plenty of hotshot pilots come through here. Most of them couldn't change a power cell if their lives depended on it. But you understand how these machines really work?" Tae-ho had been watching the way power flowed through the ship's systems. The standard repair manual said to replace 3 different components, but he could see that the real problem was in the connections between them. What if we reroute the energy flow through the backup channels? The ship would actually run more efficiently than before. Jae-sung raised his eyebrows. "Show me." They worked together for the next hour, making modifications that weren't in any official manual. When they powered up the ship, it hummed with a smooth energy that made both men Smile. Impossible, Jae-sung muttered. According to every regulation, what we just did shouldn't work. But listen to that engine sing. Word of Tai-Ho's unusual repairs began to spread through the maintenance crews. Ships that had been written off as total losses started working again, after he examined them. He fixed problems that certified technicians had declared impossible. Most importantly, he made improvements that boosted performance beyond factory specifications. Dr. Han Mi-rae first noticed Tai-Ho when she came down to inspect a cruiser that had been damaged in a training accident. 3 expert technicians had spent 2 weeks trying to restore its power systems, but the ship could only operate at 60% capacity. She was about to order it scrapped when she saw a young maintenance worker crawling around inside the engine compartment. "Excuse me," she called out. "What are you doing to my ship?" Dr. Han was the chief engineer for the station's experimental projects division. She had designed some of the most advanced vessels in the human fleet, and she didn't like unauthorized modifications to her work. Tai-Ho emerged from the engine space, his coveralls dirty with coolant fluid. "Sorry, Doctor. I was just trying to understand why the power distribution is so uneven. The damage reports show that only minor systems were hit, but the ship is running like it's missing half its components. The diagnostic computers have run every possible test," Dr. Han said coldly. 3 senior technicians have declared this vessel beyond economical repair. Are you saying they're all wrong?" Tai-Ho looked uncomfortable, but he pointed to the main power coupling. "The explosion created microfractures in the primary conduits. They're too small for the diagnostic equipment to detect, but they're causing power bleeds throughout the entire system. If we bypass those sections and reroute through the secondary manifolds, the ship should operate at full capacity." Dr. Han stared at him. The solution he proposed violated several safety protocols and would require modifications that could void the ship's certification. But his analysis made sense in a way that the official reports had not. "How did you know to look for microfractures? That level of damage wouldn't show up on any standard scan." "I don't know," Tai-Ho admitted. "When I touch the systems, I can feel where the energy isn't flowing right. It's like the ship is trying to tell me what's wrong with it." Against her better judgment, Dr. Han authorized the repairs. 2 days later, the cruiser was operating at 115% of its rated capacity. The improvements were so significant that she wrote a formal report to her superiors recommending that Tai-Ho be transferred to her research division. That transfer brought Tai-Ho into contact with Project Synthesis, the most classified research program on the station. Dr. Han led him through a series of security checkpoints into a laboratory that looked more like a medical facility than an engineering workshop. In the center of the room sat a single pilot's chair connected to thousands of fiber optic cables and neural monitoring devices. "We've been trying to create a direct interface between human consciousness and ship systems," Dr. Han explained. "The theory is that a pilot could control a vessel through thought alone, reacting faster than any manual control system would allow. The response time advantages would be enormous in combat situations." She showed him video records of the previous test attempts. Pilot after pilot had tried to link with the experimental systems, and pilot after pilot had suffered massive neural feedback. Some had been left in comas. Others had recovered but refused to go near spacecraft ever again. The few who had achieved any kind of connection described the experience as having their minds torn apart. "The interface works," Dr. Han said sadly. "We can establish the connection. But human brains aren't designed to process the kind of information flow that ships generate. The neural patterns are incompatible with our consciousness structure. We're shutting down the project next week." Tai-Ho studied the interface chair and the monitoring equipment around it. "What if the problem isn't that human brains can't handle the information? What if it's that you're trying to force the connection to work in a specific way?" "What do you mean?" "All your test pilots have been top graduates, right? People who think in standard patterns, who process information the way the military trains them to think. What if you need someone whose brain works differently?" Dr. Han looked at his personnel file. Kim Tai-Ho, rejected from military service for neural pattern incompatibility. Spatial reasoning scores below minimum threshold. The same characteristics that had made him useless to the fleet might be exactly what Project Synthesis needed. "Are you volunteering?" she asked quietly. Tai-Ho nodded. "I've been useless to everyone else. Maybe I can be useful to you." The next morning, They prepared for what everyone expected to be the final test of Project Synthesis. Dr. Han checked and double-checked the safety systems while her assistants calibrated the neural monitoring equipment. Captain Nam Yu-jin, the military liaison for the project, watched from the observation booth with obvious skepticism. "This is a waste of time," Captain Nam said. "If our best pilots couldn't handle the interface, what makes you think a maintenance worker will do any better?" Taeho settled into the interface chair and let the technicians attach the neural sensors to his head. The connections felt cold against his skin, but not unpleasant. As the system powered up, he could hear the hum of the experimental ship's engines in the next hangar. The sound seemed to call to something deep in his mind. "Initiating connection in 3, 2, 1, Dr. Han announced. The world exploded into sensation. Taeho felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his skull, flowing through circuits and conduits like water finding its way downhill. Instead of the violent rejection that other pilots had experienced, he found himself settling into the ship's systems as naturally as putting on comfortable clothes. He could feel the vessel's hull as if it were his own skin. The engines became his heartbeat, the sensors his eyes and ears. Power flowed through him like blood, and he understood every component, every connection, every possibility. The ship wasn't just a machine anymore. It was part of him. "Impossible," Captain Nam whispered as she watched the readings. "His neural activity is completely stable. He's not fighting the interface at all." Dr. Han stared at the monitors in amazement. "It's like he was born for this. His brain patterns are synchronizing with the ship's computer systems without any stress indicators. Taeho, can you hear me?" "I can hear you," Taeho replied, but his voice sounded different, calmer, more confident. "And I can hear the ship. It's been waiting for someone who could listen to it properly." For the first time in his life, Taeho felt like he belonged somewhere. The rejection and failure of the past months seemed like distant memories. Here, connected to this incredible machine, he wasn't the broken boy who couldn't pass military tests. He was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, something that might be exactly what humanity needed. The emergency sirens began wailing throughout Earth's orbital defenses at exactly 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning that would be remembered as the beginning of humanity's darkest hour. Admiral Kang Seong-ho was pulled from his sleep by the urgent comm signals flooding his personal terminal. The messages were all saying the same impossible thing. The outer colonies had gone silent, one by one, in a pattern that suggested something vast and terrible moving through human space like a plague. The first reports came from the mining stations around Proxima Centauri. "Unknown vessels approaching. Configuration unlike anything in our databases." Then static. The follow-up messages from the backup stations told the same story. "Massive biological ships, they seem to be alive. They're not responding to any communication attempts." Then nothing but the empty hiss of dead space. Within 6 hours, 17 human colonies had lost all contact with Earth. The pattern was always the same. Strange signals detected at the edge of each system, desperate transmissions about living ships that defied all known technology, then silence. Whatever was destroying humanity's outer settlements was moving faster than any known propulsion system should allow. General Park Soo-bin called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. The enormous holographic display in the war room showed the galaxy with red markers indicating each lost colony. The pattern looked like a cancer spreading through human space, consuming everything in its path. "We're dealing with something completely outside our experience," she announced to the assembled military leaders. "These aren't the raiders or pirates we've fought before. This appears to be a coordinated assault by an unknown alien species." The sea. First visual evidence arrived through a damaged probe that had escaped the destruction of the Vega mining complex. The recording showed ships that seemed grown rather than built, their hulls pulsing with organic rhythms. They moved through space like living creatures, flowing around obstacles with an eerie grace that no mechanical vessel could match. Weapons emerged from their flesh-like hulls, firing energy beams that adapted their frequency in real time to penetrate human shields. "Look at how they coordinate," Captain Nam Yu-jin pointed out as they studied the footage. "No radio transmissions, no visible command structure, but they move with perfect unity. It's like they're controlled by a single intelligence." Dr. Han, Mireille felt her blood turn cold as she watched the alien vessels in action. They're not just working together, they're learning. Look at this sequence where they encounter our defensive satellites. The first ship takes damage from the plasma cannons, but by the time the second ship approaches the same defenses, it's already adapted. Its hull configuration changes to deflect the same weapons that hurt the first vessel. The true horror became clear when the enemy reached the major colonies. New Beijing, with its population of 12 million, managed to transmit for almost 8 hours after the alien fleet arrived. The reports painted a picture of an enemy that couldn't be fought with conventional tactics. They adapt to every weapon we use against them. Came the final transmission from Admiral Chen on the colony's defense platform. Our missiles become useless after the first few hits. Our energy weapons lose effectiveness as they learn to absorb the frequencies. It's like fighting an enemy that evolves in real time. The Thunder Fleet, Jinwu's unit, was the first major human force to engage the invaders at the Battle of Wolf 359. The fleet consisted of 47 ships, including some of the most advanced vessels in human space. They met an alien force half their size and expected to demonstrate human military superiority. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. Jinwu's last message to Earth came through a damaged communication relay. They're not individual ships, they're parts of something bigger, like cells in a living organism. When we destroy one, the others learn from its death. They know our tactics before we use them. The bioships are surrounding us, cutting off our escape routes. The fleet is taking heavy casualties. If anyone receives this transmission, tell Tai-Ho that I remember the promise we made as kids. Tell him that someone needs to find a completely different way to fight these things. Only 3 ships from Thunder Fleet escaped the battle. The survivors brought back reports that chilled every military strategist who heard them. The enemy didn't just use superior technology, they possessed a form of collective intelligence that allowed them to share knowledge instantly across their entire force. Every tactic humanity tried was countered within minutes. Every weapon became useless as soon as the aliens understood how it worked. Commander Lee So-min found herself commanding the desperate defense of the Vega system after her superior officers were killed in the opening minutes of the battle. Her messages back to Earth grew increasingly frantic as the situation deteriorated. We're not fighting individual enemies. We're fighting a hive mind that learns from every encounter. They adapt faster than we can develop new strategies. Traditional military thinking is useless against an opponent that can evolve countermeasures in real time. The aliens called themselves the hegemony, and their message to humanity was simple: submit or be consumed. They had conquered dozens of galactic civilizations using the same methods. Their bioships were grown from the genetic material of defeated species, combining the best characteristics of every race they had absorbed. They fought with the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 wars against 1,000 different enemies. Dr. Han Mi Ray worked frantically in her laboratory as the reports from the front lines grew worse by the day. Project Synthesis had been shelved after Tai-Ho's successful test, considered too dangerous and experimental for practical use. But as conventional human forces continued to suffer devastating defeats, she began to wonder if their desperate situation called for desperate measures. The problem is that we're fighting the hegemony using the same kind of thinking that every other species has used, she explained to Admiral Kang during an emergency research briefing. They've seen every conventional tactic, every standard formation, every traditional approach to space combat. That's why they can adapt so quickly. They're not encountering anything new. Admiral Kang looked exhausted. In the past month, he had watched humanity lose 60% of its battle-ready vessels. The outer colonies were gone. The middle settlements were under siege, and Earth itself would be under attack within weeks if the current trend continued. What are you proposing, Doctor? Tai-Ho's neural interface test showed that he can connect with ship systems in ways we've never seen before. His brain doesn't work like a normal pilot's brain. Maybe that difference is exactly what we need against an enemy that has learned to counter normal human tactics. You want to bet humanity's survival on one untested maintenance worker? General, Park Subin couldn't hide her skepticism. Even if this interface system works, what can one ship do against a force that has destroyed entire fleets? Dr. Han pulled up the technical specifications for her experimental vessels. Not one ship. 12 ships that nobody else can properly interface with. Ships that could potentially be controlled by a single consciousness in ways the hegemony has never encountered. Taeho doesn't think like our military commanders. He sees patterns and solutions that trained officers miss. Against an enemy that adapts to conventional thinking, maybe we need someone who thinks unconventionally. The debate continued through the night as more reports arrived from the front lines. The hegemony was pushing deeper into human space, their bioships growing larger and more sophisticated as they absorbed the wreckage of defeated human vessels. Time was running out, and every conventional option had already failed. Captain Nam Yu-jin, who had witnessed Taeho's successful interface test, finally spoke up. "I've seen what he can do with that connection. It's not like anything we've trained for or prepared for. When he links with a ship, he doesn't just control it. He becomes it. The vessel responds to his thoughts before he's even consciously made a decision." Admiral Kang stared at the strategic display showing the hegemony's advance toward Earth. Red markers indicated enemy positions moving steadily through the solar system's outer defenses. In 3 weeks, maybe 4, the bioships would reach humanity's home world. Every plan, every strategy, every conventional approach had failed. "Bring me this Kim Taeho," he said finally. "If we're going to lose this war, we might as well lose it trying something impossible." In the maintenance levels of Station Kepler 7, Taeho was working on a damaged transport when Jae-sung came to find him. "Kid, you need to come with me. There are some very important people who want to talk to you." "Did I do something wrong?" Taeho asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Jae-sung's expression was serious but not unkind. "No, kid. I think you might be the only person who can do something." "Right." Taeho stood in the Admiral's conference room, feeling completely out of place among the gold-braided uniforms and polished metals that surrounded him. His maintenance coveralls had been replaced with a crisp military uniform that felt strange against his skin, but inside he was still the same person who had been rejected from service 8 months ago. Admiral Kang Seung-ho studied him with tired eyes that had seen too much defeat in recent weeks. "Kim Tae-ho," the Admiral said slowly. "Dr. Han tells me you have a unique ability to interface with our experimental ships. She believes this ability might be our only chance against the hegemony. Are you willing to take command of a fleet?" The question was so absurd that Tae-ho almost laughed. "Sir, I failed every military test. I've never commanded anything larger than a repair crew. I don't know the first thing about fleet tactics or space combat." General Park Soo-bin leaned forward. "That might be exactly what we need. Every conventional tactic has failed against these bioships. They adapt to traditional military thinking faster than we can change our strategies. Maybe we need someone who doesn't think like a traditional military commander." Dr. Han activated the holographic display, showing the technical specifications for 12 experimental vessels. These ships were designed around the neural interface technology. They require direct mental connection to operate at full capacity. No one else has been able to successfully link with them, but you achieved perfect synchronization on your first attempt. Tae-ho studied the ship designs. They looked nothing like standard human vessels, with organic curves and flowing lines that reminded him of living creatures. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "But I still don't understand how I'm supposed to command a fleet when I can barely understand basic military procedures." Captain Nam Yu-jin had been quiet during the meeting, but now she spoke up. "Maybe that's the point. The hegemony has defeated every properly trained commander we've sent against them. They've learned to counter every tactical manual, every standard formation, every regulation approach to space warfare. You don't think like our officers because you never learned to think like them." The first test came 2 days later at the Mars orbital shipyards. Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the experimental dreadnought Soul's Thunder, feeling the neural interface cables connecting his consciousness to the ship's systems. The vessel was unlike anything humanity had ever built, its hull flowing with energy patterns that seemed almost alive. His crew was a collection of misfits and volunteers who had nowhere else to go. Sergeant Oh Min-ho had been court-martialed for insubordination after refusing to follow orders he considered tactically suicidal. Lieutenant Seo Hai-jin was a brilliant pilot whose unconventional flying style had been deemed reckless and unpredictable by her former commanders. Chief Engineer Park Dong-wook had been transferred to the experimental fleet after proposing modifications that violated every safety regulation. "These ships don't make sense," Dong-wook admitted as they ran system checks. "The power distribution is completely irregular. The weapon placements follow no standard pattern, and the navigation systems operate on principles I don't recognize." According to everything I learned in engineering school, they shouldn't be able to function at all. But when Taiho activated the neural link, the ship responded like it had been waiting for him. Power flowed through circuits in patterns that felt natural, despite being completely unorthodox. The weapon systems aligned themselves with targeting, solutions that appeared in his mind before he consciously thought of them. The entire vessel became an extension of his awareness, as familiar as his own body. The real test came when hegemony scouts arrived at the Mars system. 3 bioships emerged from hyperspace, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. Intelligence. Reports indicated that they were advanced scouts for a larger force, sent to probe human defenses before the main invasion fleet arrived. Captain Yu Hyun-soo watched from the Mars defense platform as Taiho's small fleet moved to intercept the scouts. "This is madness," he muttered to his communications officer. 12 experimental ships against proven hegemony biovessels. They'll be slaughtered. But what happened next defied every tactical prediction. Taiho's ships moved through space, in formations that seemed random but created overlapping fields of fire that the bioships couldn't predict. When the aliens adapted to one attack pattern, the human vessels had already shifted to something completely different. The neural link allowed Taiho to coordinate his fleet with a precision that no conventional command structure could match. "How is he doing that?" Captain Yu asked as he watched the battle unfold. "His ships are responding to threats before the scouts even make their attack runs. It's like he can see the future." The truth was simpler, but more profound. Through the neural interface, Taiho could feel the quantum fluctuations that preceded hyperspace transitions. He sensed the energy buildups that occurred before weapons fired. The bioship's organic nature made them emit patterns of electromagnetic activity that his enhanced consciousness could read like a book. He wasn't predicting the future, he was reading the present in ways that normal human awareness couldn't process. The first scout fell to a coordinated strike from 6 different angles simultaneously. The second tried to adapt by shifting its hull configuration, but found itself targeted by weapons that attacked from dimensions it hadn't considered. The third scout managed to transmit a brief message to its fleet before Taiho's vessels overwhelmed its defenses. In the aftermath of the battle, as debris from the destroyed bioships drifted through space, the Mars defense crews stared in shocked silence. 3 hegemony scouts had been destroyed without the loss of a single human vessel. It was the first clear victory humanity had achieved since the war began. News of the Mars victory spread through human space faster than light-speed communications. The reject who had failed military tests had accomplished what the coalition's finest admirals could not. President Hong Soo-jin personally contacted Admiral Kang to authorize Taiho's immediate promotion to full admiral, despite his complete lack of formal military training. But Taiho knew that Mars was just the beginning. The scout ships had transmitted information about his fleet's capabilities back to the hegemony command structure. The next engagement would be against an enemy that had learned from this defeat, one that would arrive prepared for his unconventional tactics. Jae-sung, who had been transferred to serve as Taiho's senior maintenance chief, found the young admiral, standing alone on the observation deck of Seoul's Thunder. "Having second thoughts?" the old Marine asked. "The scouts will have reported everything to their main fleet," Taiho said. "They know about the neural interface now, about how our ships move and fight. When the real invasion force arrives, they'll be ready for us." Jae-sung nodded slowly. "Probably, but you're forgetting something important. You're not the same person who failed those tests 8 months ago. You've found your place, your purpose. And these bioships? They might be able to adapt to conventional tactics. But you've never used conventional tactics. You make it up as you go along." Jin Woo arrived on the ship that evening, transferred from the survivors of Thunder Fleet to serve as Taiho's second-in-command. The reunion between the childhood friends was emotional but brief. Both men understood that sentiment was a luxury they couldn't afford with the main hegemony fleet approaching. "I'm sorry about the Thunder Fleet," Taiho said quietly. Jin Woo shook his head. "Don't be sorry. Be ready. Because when that invasion fleet arrives, you're going to need every impossible trick you can think of. The bioships that destroyed my fleet were just the advance guard. What's coming next will be 10 times larger and 100 times more dangerous." standing together on the bridge of Soul's Thunder, watching the stars through the viewport. Both men knew that humanity's survival now depended on the boy who had been deemed unfit for military service. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, but there was no time for laughter. The hegemony's main fleet was 3 days away from Earth, and Taeho's impossible ships were humanity's last hope. "Are you ready for this?" Jinwoo asked. Taeho smiled, feeling the neural interface humming quietly in his mind, connecting him to technologies that shouldn't exist, and tactics that had never been tried. "I was born ready. We just didn't know it yet." The hegemony's main fleet tore through hyperspace like a wound in reality itself, emerging in the void between Jupiter and Saturn in a display of power that dwarfed anything humanity had ever witnessed. Over 10,000 bioships materialized. From the darkness, each one a living weapon that had devoured entire civilizations across the galaxy. Their organic hulls pulsed with alien intelligence, and their very presence seemed to make space itself recoil in horror. Admiral Taeho watched the enemy fleet's arrival from the bridge of Soul's Thunder, feeling the neural interface translate, the quantum distortions into sensations his mind could process. The scale of the invasion force was overwhelming. His own fleet numbered barely 300 vessels, a desperate collection of experimental ships, retrofitted civilian craft, and every spaceworthy hull the coalition could scrape together from the outer colonies. "Sir," Lieutenant Seo Hae-jin reported from her station, "long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the bioships. They're larger than anything we've encountered before. Some of those vessels are the size of small moons. Through the neural link, Taeho could feel his fleet's readiness like a living thing. Each ship was an extension of his consciousness, each crew member connected through the impossible technology that had made this moment possible. But even with their unprecedented coordination, the odds were staggering. By every tactical analysis ever written, humanity was about to die. The hegemony's commander revealed itself as the bioships arranged themselves in attack formation. The first mind was an ancient consciousness that had existed since the birth of the swarm, the original intelligence that had spawned the entire collective. It reached out through hyperspace to make contact with this strange human fleet that had dared to resist its advanced scouts. "You are the one called Kim Taeho," the first mind spoke directly into his consciousness through channels that bypassed normal communication entirely. "Your victory at Mars was noted. Your neural interface technology is primitive but interesting. You will surrender your ships and crews for incorporation into our collective. Resistance is pointless against the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 conquered civilizations." Taeho felt the alien presence pressing against his mind like a cold tide, but the neural interface held firm. "We don't surrender," he replied through the same impossible channels, "and your accumulated wisdom has a blind spot. You've never faced someone who thinks the way we think." The first mind's amusement was like ice forming in Taeho's thoughts. "Child, we have consumed species that thought in dimensions your mind cannot imagine. We have absorbed the tactical knowledge of warriors who fought across 10,000 years of galactic warfare. What can you possibly do that we have not already encountered and countered?" "Let me show you," Taeho said. The battle began with humanity's desperate last stand taking a form that defied every law of space combat. Through the neural interface, Taeho distributed his consciousness across every ship in the fleet simultaneously, creating a collective intelligence that combined human creativity with hive-mind coordination. Each vessel became both independent and connected, capable of individual decision-making while participating in a greater whole. Captain Nam Yu-jin, commanding the heavy cruiser Busan's Pride, felt the neural link guide her into a firing position that seemed suicidal until she realized it was part of a 3-dimensional trap involving 17 other ships. Around her, Commander Lim Jae-sung coordinated with Lieutenant Seo Hae-jin in maneuvers they had never trained for but executed with perfect precision. The bioships moved to counter the human fleet using standard hive-mind tactics, but found themselves facing an enemy that was both collective and individual, organized and chaotic, predictable and completely random. When they adapted to one attack pattern, the human ships had already shifted to something that existed in the spaces between conventional tactics. Dr. Han Mi-rae watched the battle from the command bunker beneath Seoul, monitoring neural feedback, patterns that should have been impossible. He's not just commanding the fleet, she breathed into her communication headset. He's become the fleet. Every ship is like an extension of his body, but each captain retains their individual consciousness. It's a form of collective intelligence that's never existed before. The first mind reeled in confusion as its bioships began to falter. For eons, it had conquered through pure coordination, overwhelming individual brilliance with collective might. Its tactics had defeated species that fought with crystal-based logic, races that thought in mathematical poetry, and civilizations that waged war through controlled evolution. But this human fleet was something new. Impossible. The first mind transmitted as its carefully orchestrated formations began to collapse. You fight like a swarm, but you think like individuals. You coordinate like a hive mind, but you create like separate beings. This contradiction cannot exist. Tejo's response came through actions rather than words. His fleet flowed through space like water, finding weaknesses in the bioship formations that shouldn't have been visible. When the aliens adapted their hull configurations to resist plasma weapons, they found themselves vulnerable to kinetic strikes from unexpected angles. When they shifted to counter-missile attacks, energy beams appeared from directions they hadn't considered. Sergeant Oh Min Ho, operating the weapon systems on Seoul's Thunder, felt the neural interface guide his targeting solutions with an intuition that transcended training. "Sir, I'm getting firing solutions for targets that aren't even in visual range yet. How is this possible?" "Don't question it," Tejo replied, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ship itself. "Trust the connection. Trust the pattern." The pattern was something that had never existed in galactic warfare before. Each human ship moved according to its own tactical assessment while participating in a greater strategy that encompassed the entire fleet. The bioships found themselves fighting an enemy that was simultaneously one consciousness and 300 separate minds, a contradiction that their collective intelligence couldn't process. As the hegemony's formations began to break apart, the first mind made a desperate decision. It began merging its consciousness with the largest bioship in the fleet, creating a vessel the size of a small moon that could end the battle with a single devastating strike. The fusion process was visible across the entire battlefield as organic matter flowed between ships, creating a monster that dwarfed every other vessel in space. But Tejo was ready. Through the neural link, he had felt the approaching fusion, and made a choice that would have been impossible for any normal human consciousness. He distributed his awareness across every ship in the fleet simultaneously, creating a targeting solution that required perfect coordination between 300 vessels firing at exactly the same instant. The combined firepower of humanity's last fleet struck the first mind's avatar from precisely calculated angles, using the creature's own adaptive biology against it. The bioship imploded under the coordinated assault, its organic structure unable to process the contradictory damage patterns that arrived from every direction at once. The death of the first mind sent shockwaves through the entire hegemony fleet. Bioships that had fought with perfect coordination suddenly found themselves without central guidance. Some began attacking each other in confusion. Others fled into hyperspace, carrying tales of an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. In the aftermath of the battle, as scattered bioships retreated into the darkness between stars, Tejo stood on the bridge of Seoul's Thunder, surrounded by his crew. The neural interface was quiet now, a gentle hum in the back of his consciousness rather than the overwhelming symphony of battle. Around him, officers who had been written off as misfits and rejects celebrated humanity's impossible victory. Jin Woo approached his childhood friend with a mixture of pride and awe. "So what now, Admiral? The hegemony is broken, but there's still a galaxy full of other threats out there." Tejo looked out at the stars through the bridge viewport. Earth hung in the distance like a blue jewel, safe for the first time in months. The neural interface had changed him in ways he was still discovering, but at his core he was still the boy who had been rejected for thinking differently. "Now we rebuild," he said quietly. "And maybe next time the galaxy needs defending, people will think twice before judging someone by their test scores." His parents, Kim Sang-min and Kim Hye-jin, watched from Earth as news of the victory spread across human space. Their son, the boy who had failed every military examination, was being hailed as the savior of humanity. President Hong Soo-jin personally called to thank the family for raising such a remarkable young man. Mrs. Yoon, The neighbor who had always whispered about Tai-Ho being different now told everyone who would listen that she had always known he was special. Mr. Bay just smiled and nodded, remembering the quiet boy who had fixed broken things in ways that shouldn't have worked, but always did. The man branded useless had become humanity's greatest weapon, not despite his differences, but because of them. In a war that required thinking, beyond conventional limitations, Earth's salvation had come from someone who had never fit conventional expectations in the first place.